Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about queues. Okay, so let's jump straight into it. I never thought I'd say this, but I went out and brought a handmade queue. I've always been an advocate of using cheap queues because I think that they offer something just as much as a handmade queue does. And I've always owned cheap budget queues before and played quite well with them. But just out of curiosity, and because I just really wanted to own a handmade queue for once, I thought I would go out and buy one. Now, I went to a queue manufacturer which is local to me in the Shropshire area, Mastercraft Queues, and I went into the workshop, had a look around at the queues that they already had that were already made, and I noticed this one in the rack just hanging up there. I just wanted a nice basic ebony butt queue, and more importantly I wanted a maple shaft, which is also, it's quite rigid, which is what I'm used to anyway with the budget queues. So a nice plain ebony butt, and the specs of the queue at the time of purchase were 58 inches high, so a few inches taller than my previous queue, which was 56.5. So now I have to hold the queue a bit further down, which isn't any real hardship, it's just a minor adjustment when I'm playing. And over time I'm going to get used to where that particular area is, so it's not much of a problem. And I wanted to try and get as little alterations made to it if possible, if at all required. So when I picked up the queue, I was in the workshop and just picked it up and thought, yeah, this looks nice, I like it. I had a feel for the queue, which I thought would be enough, to make an informed choice about whether or not to buy it. So once I visited the shop and looked at the queue, I then walked away because I wasn't too confident on making that commitment straight away, because I needed to compare as much of the specifications of my previous queue as possible so that this would be an adequate replacement. So over time I started to feel like, yeah, I really did like that queue when I went to visit, and I should have really brought it at the time, but I didn't. But now I know what I'm looking for, I'm going to buy it. So I brought the queue because I really wanted a plain one with nothing fancy at the bottom, but this was the only queue available at the time that was plain, so I picked it up. But after playing with it a few times, I quickly noticed that the butt diameter was very, very large, and I wasn't getting on with it as well. So I measured it out of curiosity, and it measured close to 31 millimeters, which was quite a lot of a change. I mean, it's only a millimetre or two, but on the butt diameter, when you're gripping the cue, you do really notice the difference, and I wasn't that happy about it. So, and the other thing I noticed as well was the balance point. It was really heavy at the bottom here, so it meant that there was virtually no life in the front. It was just really, really light, and I didn't like it at all. Just nothing like my previous queue at all. So I went back to the workshop and mentioned this to them, and it was quite an interesting visit because I learned a hell of a lot of things that I didn't know before. So it was explained to me that because I did mention about wanting the weight moving forward so that it felt a bit more balanced going forward, and I mentioned about there being a weight inside. So they said, well, what we'll do is we'll have a look at the queue and we'll scan it to see where the weight actually is inside the queue. Surprisingly, there was no weight in the queue, which I thought was quite strange. And the reason for that is because ebony is quite a heavy wood. Now, I didn't know that, and so is maple. But in comparison to the two, ebony is a lot heavier. So, and my previous queue, should I mention, had a rosewood butt. Now, rosewood is very light in comparison to ebony, which was part of the reason why the balance point on my previous cue felt more going forward, because maple is heavier than rosewood, so it took the cue balance up to the front more, which was what I got used to and which was what I preferred. So it was explained to me that that's the reason why there's no weight inside the cue, so we can't alter the position of the weight, because it's just an ebony butt with no weight inside because it's so heavy. But fortunately for me, the cue diameter near the butt was too thick, and I wanted it slimmed down to follow the natural taper of the cue as much as possible. So I went for 29mm, which when I've got my hand over the cue now, it feels much more comfortable. It's not as though I'm struggling to get my fingers all the way around, which I was with a thicker butt. So I quickly realised that 31mm was just way over the top for me, just too much. And my previous cue was just shy of 30. So this isn't a million miles away from what that was. So this is now 29. And when I brought this cue originally, before I had the alterations done, I was told that it weighed 18 ounces or 18 point something, not a lot in it at all. But my previous cue was only 15 ounces, so it was very light compared to this. Now, after the slim down was completed, they did warn me previously that I would lose maybe an ounce in weight. So this is now 17 ounces, which isn't much of an hardship anyway, because this is still going to be 2 ounces heavier than what my old cue was, because that was, in all fairness, too light. So I've ended up with this cue now, and I really am happy with it. I've not played a great deal with it since I've had the alterations made, but on first impressions, I'm very, very happy with it. Really, really happy with it, and I can't wait to get going with it and get really used to it. Which shouldn't take too long now, because it's virtually a direct replacement for my previous cue. It's just made of better quality wood, and it's just a lot better, especially with it being handmade. I've always liked the look of these with the ebony butt, and especially a maple, and it's quite clean as well, so I'm really looking forward to using it. Going back to the balance point again, the balance point on my previous cue was 19 inches, which is quite far forward with the weight. In terms of the weight, it feels like more balance going forward, like I mentioned before. So it's not back heavy, so kind of lifeless at the front. I mean, that's not a bad thing, because it's all down to personal preference anyway. But for the characteristics of this cue, moving forward, I needed the cue to be more balanced going through to the front than all the weight being right at the back, which for me just isn't a good feel at all. So considering they are two different cues, I think the characteristics now have like kind of married together a lot closer to what I would prefer to play with. So this is now 18.5 inches to the balance point, but originally when I brought it, it was 17.5, so that was why it was too back heavy, because the balance point was too far this way. Now it's gone forward an inch because of the slim down. But like I say, I learned quite a lot of things when I went to that workshop, because it was just things I didn't realise. I used to think that every single cue that was made had a weight inside, but that's clearly not the case. So you learn something new every day. Yeah, I'm really happy with it. I didn't think I would ever own a handmade cue, because I never thought that I could really justify the amount of money spent to own one, because cheap cues are the only kind of cues I've ever used in the past, and I've always got on relatively well with them. But just out of curiosity mainly, I just thought, right, I'm going to treat myself, I'm going to get myself a proper cue so that I've got no excuses whatsoever. If the cue's right, then everything else should be okay with no excuses attached to them at all. So I just need to get used to it now, which I don't think it'll take too long. I also picked up a mini butt for it. It's one of the plastic ones. It's not, so there's my bargain head coming out straight away again. I'm just buying cheap stuff all the time. So this was the plastic mini butt that I got, and I got this screw-in extension as well to fit it, because it's got a joint at the back there on the butt. So I thought I would get this extension as well. So I've got all the gear now. Anyway, the rest's up to me. I've got some of this chalk. I don't know if you've ever used it before, but I've given it a go and I can't quite get on with it. It's a bit too wet for me, a bit too damp. So I'm just going to stick with the original triangle chalk that I've got, because I still like it, and I mean, as long as it stays quite moist and doesn't dry out, I think it's the best chalk you can use really. But I mean, that's just my personal preference. And I got this case as well to look after it properly, so it will no longer be in a Q tube and hangs up on the wall. It'll just be in this case with me now all the time. So, but yeah, highly recommend these cues. I never thought I'd say it, but I went out and I went and got myself a handmade cue. So now let's just see what I can do with it. Hopefully better things than I could with the other cue, because I think that's ultimately the test that I'm trying to run, to prove that a handmade cue is going to be far better than an economy cue. So only time will tell, I suppose. But yeah, I just thought I'd share this video with people that have seen the videos previously about cues and what my journey's been throughout. And I hope that this was useful to you. And yeah, hopefully there was a bit of information in there that you found useful. So thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so, because that helps you to follow me for any future content that I may put out there. And thanks again to everybody else that's watched, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.